Hello.
Hi.
Welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Rig, where you and I normally find out what we're talking about at the same time when court reveals pictures, videos, and or clues in any form or fashion that I then have to guess which tale we're talking about. However, today I am giving the clue.
We're switching it up, which makes me a little nervous. I'm not going to lie.
It's going to be so fun. You ready?
Yes.
This isn't funny, but...
Yeah, no, that's not funny. That's not funny. If you are listening and not viewing, first of all, I recommend switching to YouTube and watching this one.
It's worth it.
It is a picture of me from last week with my left eye completely swollen shut, red, inflamed, very bad.
Yes, and it sounds very callous that I just laughed at it, but it's because I knew that this picture was coming next.
Yes. So
that is even better.
That is better. So I don't know if you guys know the game Animal Crossing. It is a game for the Nintendo Switch, and you get to basically be your own little character and live on an island and do whatever you want. And so essentially we use that for our inner child to just like go play. And so little Courtney, when she is hunting through the forest, if she gets stung by a wasp, she goes, ow, 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 ow. And literally her eye swells shut. And so Beth was like, oh my gosh, you look exactly like your Animal Crossing character.
That's right.
She proceeded to log in as me.
Yep.
Get stung by a bee and then have me stand in front of it to take a picture.
That's right.
To be fair, this was like before we got to serious level. So this was still laughable at the time.
Yeah, we were just like, oh man, you got some swelling going on. And then when we got to that level of swelling, which is the next level. Again, if you're listening, highly encourage you to head over to YouTube and watch it, because we have a picture of Court's real face in real time. And today we are going to be talking about what I have named the episode, because I got to name it this time.
Yes, you're doing all of the things this time.
I am channeling my inner Courtney.
Yes, you're doing great so far.
This episode is called Mast Cell Madness. So today we are talking about the wild and crazy road of mast cell activation syndrome, which is the autoimmune condition, wait for it, that we both have.
Yes.
And now, before you go, oh my, it must be something in your environment that you have triggered and somehow you both have it. This is a genetic autoimmune condition. We have both struggled with it throughout our entire lives, didn't understand that's what it was. And once we both got diagnosed, all of our symptoms made sense. We present very differently. Obviously, I lost all my hair, which is, thankfully, Courtney did not get that. That would have
been too much if we both were completely bald and we're like, hi, we have mast cell activation. It would have been too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
So today we thought we would walk you through what it's like when we go through a flare-up, which is what Court was having this earlier this week. Was it this week?
9 days.
Last week.
It lasted 9 days. That's all I know. I don't know what week we're in, but I know it was a 9-day run that this happened.
The easiest way I describe this condition is that our bodies are just like hyper dramatic. They're hyper dramatic about the reactions that should not be reactions. So your mast cells are the cells in your body that are responsible for allergic reactions. They do great things. They can, I think they've got like, they can release like over 1,000 chemical mediators to tell your body like, oh no, we're in trouble, do certain things to keep you safe. Ours, however, ours think they're like Braveheart or something and always keeping us safe. And really it just makes life kind of miserable, because our bodies like overreact to everything normal.
I've never seen that movie, by the way.
I haven't either, because it's a little bit intense for me.
Yeah, I wasn't into it. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, Mel Gibson. And I was like, not my jam. David Duchovny, X-Files, yes. So, but I get the reference. So yes, it is. It brings the battles of all battles, which is great if if it's necessary.
If warranted.
But if not warranted, it can create some major complications
right.
like it did last week. And this is actually really great to do on the podcast because when we go missing for a week on Instagram, everyone freaks out and assumes we're dead. And this time I was kind of like,
that's a valid concern, actually.
Concern this week. So instead of responding to everyone in individual DMs, this will kind of tell the story and give some insight into what it's like to travel full time while also having an autoimmune condition.
Now, disclaimer, we are not MCAS. That's the abbreviation for Mast Cell Activation Syndrome. We are not MCAS experts. We are not doctors. We are only talking about our experiences so far. So we'll have a bunch of different resources that we'll link in the show notes, etc. But this is mostly to tell the tale of the time that court, this isn't even your first 9-day flare, but that's the purpose of this episode, not to fully inform you about the entire condition because there's a lot to it.
And we're still learning. This is, we were talking about like when we did our V-Life, we had no idea what we were doing, but we kind of shared as we were learning. And a lot of people found that helpful. So now we're kind of like redoing that, but with this condition.
That's right. So where do you want to start?
You're the leader.
Oh, man.
The ringleader.
Okay. So let's start with our diagnosis. You said this is still kind of a new thing for us. So why don't you tell, now this just became an interview. Now tell us when we were first diagnosed.
Well, the short version, because this will take forever. And there's also going to be another tale about how we found out who had it, all of that. Right. But the short version is we were diagnosed in June of 2023. It is now almost March. February of 2024. So very, very new. And the thing is, like Beth said, there's no exact way that people react. There's different triggers. Like for me, chemicals, strong scents, those really trigger me. Beth is fine. She loves Clorox. She loves the smell of lemon pledge. Like that's her thing. So
okay, let me just clarify, not her thing. Like I don't go around sniffing it, but yes, it does. It doesn't
I don't know what
burn
you do.
my lungs.
I don't know what you do in your free time. So essentially, we've been kind of like learning the throes of this as we've been experiencing it individually as a couple. And then, so what happened last week was I woke up one morning and I had a little bit of swelling in my eyelid. And I was like, that's kind of weird. But the day before I cried a lot in therapy. So like eyes were kind of poofy and it wasn't that big of a deal. We were just like, that's kind of weird. Your body's strange. My body likes to inflame. It gets red, hot, swollen, like that's how it typically likes to react to things. And so then it got to the point where picture one.
Yep.
It was like very swollen, very, very swollen. So we're like, okay, this is more than just like I cried during therapy. And it was just one. It was just one eyelid.
Yeah. So the timeline on this, though, so you noticed that your eyes were puffy on a Wednesday. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it kind of just stayed at that same level.
Well, it actually went up and down. So like I put a compress on it because I'm like, it's angry. So I did like a warm compress. So it actually went away all the way. And I was like, oh, it's fine. And then it came back. So yeah, it was like up and down for 4 days, but very minor.
But it was minor in that it was just like it almost was like the rim of your eyelid was a little bit swollen. And then Monday morning,
oh my gosh,
you woke up and you're like, my eye really hurts.
It was so painful.
And that bad boy,
so painful,
looked like you had really just gotten in a brawl.
Yeah. So it was very painful. So what I did was I called our MCAS specialist doctor. We are traveling right now, so we are nowhere near there. This is like a back home where our specialist is. And I was like, I think I'm having an allergic reaction. This is not typical of something I see. And essentially they wanted me to take the correct steps and said, well, you need to get it looked at because if there's an infection, like there could be other things going on.
Which is smart. I mean, it's your eye.
Right. So, inside travel life, you are in a state you're not super familiar with. You might not have a primary doctor. I did not have an ophthalmologist here. So thank goodness I could easily log into our insurance app, search for people in network who were taking new patients, and they got me in like an hour and a half. It was amazing. So we went into the ophthalmologist, and he looked at my eye, and he's like, I don't see infection, but it could be because the red is like traveling down your cheek a little bit. He didn't see a sty, and I think those were kind of like the two things we assumed were happening.
Yeah.
And he was like, I do see some clogged oil glands in your eyelid. And I'm like, okay. So he's like, you know, here are these glasses. We'll have to pull up that picture. Here are these cool glasses. You like heat them in the microwave and it'll help it drain. But we were talking about like how inflamed it was. And I think we all were kind of like, this doesn't seem typical for an oil gland swell, but like, you know, who knows? We'll just attack it from all sides. We'll do steroids, we'll heat. And I remember specifically asking, this should not get worse, correct? Like, this is pretty bad. Like, it should not get worse. He's like, no, if anything, it should start to go down. So I'm like, okay, no big deal. We get the glasses, get the antibiotics, come home. Yeah. And I listen to Reesa Teesa on TikTok because I can't use my eyes, but I could use my ears to hear the tea, and the tea was hot. And I went to bed, and I thought like, okay, I'm good. And then the next morning I woke up, and it was even worse, even more red. It was painful. And at this point, I was like, this is an allergic reaction.
So to clarify, when you called our specialist, you were looking for steroids, and they said, go make sure it's not an infection. When we went to the doctor, he said, it doesn't look like there's infection, but just in case, we're going to put you on antibiotics. So the ophthalmologist didn't give steroids. He gave antibiotics, and then he did say it normally looks worse in the morning. Just FYI, normally looks worse in the morning. But when on Tuesday morning, we were like, that is a lot worse. Now the thing is, when you're dealing with health complications on the road, and you have a condition like ours, where our body does very weird things, he probably had no idea. Like,
who?
The doctor.
Ophthalmologist?
The ophthalmologist. Like,
oh, yeah.
He was looking at it as a guy who knew eyes.
Well, and that's why, like, we have to make sure they know that. So at one point, I told him they did the intake. I saw the nurse. I don't know what they're called before the ophthalmologist. Tech nurse. And I made sure to say, I have this autoimmune condition. Like, you have to always say it, because if you don't say, I have a condition where my allergic cells are overreactive, they're not gonna like look at the full picture. So I did say, like, I do have this condition.
In that statement, it doesn't really mean anything to them still, because they don't know what MCAS is, right? So even when he's looking at her face and her eye is really swollen, and he said, your cheek looks red too, it could have been a minor infection, but it also could have been flushing, because that's part of MCAS, but he wouldn't know that.
Right. And the reason I knew to ask for steroids, like that's why I called the first day, was because my last reaction I had, we're still not fully sure what caused it. We think it was a combination of getting sick and off-gassing from our new rig. Whatever. It took a steroid shot, antibiotics, Benadryl for multiple days. So I had been through this once before where I was like, I need steroids. This is not going away without steroids. But we did due diligence. Next morning, woke up very, very, very bad. And I called our specialist and I said, okay, he's cleared me. It's not infection. I'm on antibiotics just in case. He's given me the eye mask. Like, basically, I said it's none of these things. So at this point, I know this is an allergic reaction. And that's kind of when things really spiraled out of control. So it was not only that I needed the steroids to help with the immediate eye situation, but it was roughly after we realized I was going in and out of multiple bouts of anaphylaxis.
Yep. And the way that yours presents, mine presents very differently than yours.
In your butthole?
Mine, yes, responds in my intestines, but yours responds in your chest, in your heart, and your throat. And that gets very scary very quickly.
Yeah, and that's actually something we learned about with this condition, which we'll link a resource below about what signs of anaphylaxis actually are, because I think we all have this vision of what anaphylaxis is, but oftentimes what we think of is like the most extreme version, which is like EpiPen, throat swelling shut. But there are a lot of signs of anaphylaxis, and there are different stages. And so when I get to like the stage just before more EpiPen, I'm drooling, my chest is pounding, my blood pressure drops, then shoots back up, my throat will swell, I'll get stuffy nose. And so all of this kept coming, and I'm like, what is going on? This is an eye thing. Why am I having these symptoms? And I do have an EpiPen, by the way, which, thank goodness, when we were at our last wellness visit back home, I told him I've never been stung by a bee. And if this is the condition I have, I would feel more comfortable having an EpiPen. And also because tomatoes have sent me into stage 4 anaphylaxis and black pepper, he said, yes, like you need to have this in case you get into food on accident or you get stung by a bee. So thank goodness, because I was literally sitting on the couch with the EpiPen in my lap, just like waiting. Not that I wanted it to come, but at least I had something, because if I didn't have that security, I imagine we would have had to go to the ER. Like,
yeah, we really wouldn't have had a choice.
It got really scary. Yeah.
I mean, in those instances, Benadryl is our best friend.
Yes.
And, you know, the first time when your throat was closing with the tomato incident, which we didn't understand, like before we knew, like her body was like, didn't really like tomatoes, but then at some point it changed and said, I violently don't like tomatoes.
Yeah. So again, this will be like another story down the road, but the short version is we did an elimination diet, and I am the one that primarily cooks. So we were doing it for Beth, but I'm like, I'm just going to eat how you eat. Removed tomatoes for 8 months, and then hardcore went into a Little C's pizza with a whole tub of sauce, vomiting, throat swelling, blisters in the back. And
drooling.
That's another thing we learned with this condition in anaphylaxis is when you remove a food for a long time and then reintroduce it, your reaction can be much more violent. And so back to the storyline. So I get the steroids and I'm still on antibiotics, but then all of a sudden my body is just in and out of anaphylaxis. And we finally realized what was causing it was freaking food. Like, just,
any food.
Well, yeah. So what was causing it? I mean, what happened was when the eye glands were clogged, my body started saying there's something wrong, there's something wrong, there's something wrong. And so it got upset in the eye area. But then what that does is it activates the rest of the immune system in the body. And now they think nothing is safe because there is a foreign invader, which was probably just dirt and oil in my body. But then my whole body was like, something's wrong, something's wrong. And the whole thing it's trying to do is get it out. So when you're having anaphylaxis and you're vomiting or having diarrhea, your body is trying to get it out while the cells are reacting. And so I had oatmeal for breakfast. Oatmeal has always been a safe food for me, low histamine.
It's a no-go that day.
And all of a sudden, I was like, I'm literally going into these anaphylactic symptoms from freaking oatmeal. So the 2 days after the steroids, I was literally taking 25 to 50 milligrams of Benadryl every 5 to 6 hours, because the second it started to wear off, my body was going through it again. And thank goodness, our friend Kate, who is
I call her Dr. Kate. I've just elevated her. I've given her a promotion. I call her Dr. Kate.
She deserves it. So she is the one that initially taught us about this condition. And she literally has been like my point of contact through everything we've gone through, because I told you, I was like, if I didn't have her to text while all of this was going on, this flare up was so different than the other ones, I would have been really freaked out. And she explained to me, like, your body, everything coming in is a threat right now. Until this stuff gets out of your eye, like, your body is just saying, nope, 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 nope. And she suggested, which it was so brilliant, she said, you need to go on like a chicken and rice diet. Like, the diet you
like
feed
sick little doggies,
dogs and cats. Yeah, that was my first thought. I was like, I remember making this for my dog when she had a stomach ache, but it was literally plain white rice, chicken with like a little bit of olive oil and salt. And I ate it and I didn't react for the first time in 2 days. And I almost cried because I was so relieved. So that was like day 4, 5, 6 that it was just eating chicken and rice for every meal until eventually I could reintroduce foods. And it was weird because when I would reintroduce the foods after that, there was still like a little bit of it, like the drooling, the chest pain, and then it would go away, and then it kind of went backwards. So that stopped happening, but then I would get a stuffy nose and like a scratchy throat. So it's almost like it went...
You mean backwards in that the symptoms got less?
Yes,
like they were not as intense as like chest pain.
Yeah.
And,
so like on the scale of anaphylaxis or allergic reaction, it like started to back off a little bit and be like, maybe we don't need to send your heart through your chest. And it was the chest like squeezing and pain and pressure. I literally thought at one point I accidentally took my ADHD stimulant instead of the steroids, because they look exactly the same. And when you have ADHD, it's very easy to mix things up. And at one point I was like, literally, did I take the wrong medication? And I didn't, but it was just so scary.
Well, so you started moving in the right direction, and then it got to that next Friday, and we were going to try to be normal humans and go out to eat, and we went to a restaurant, and you got a salad and just said, can you make sure it doesn't have this, this, and this, no pepper on anything, no tomatoes, etc. And you did fine. Your body did great not going into anaphylaxis.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Way to go. And then we got home, and you ended up doing some dry brushing.
Oh, gosh. Yep.
Dry brushing to help with lymphatic
drainage and get your blood circulating.
That's right. So you did that, and you went to rinse off as you do. And you thought, while I'm in here, let's just wash my hair. Because
it was
two birds, one
greasy
stone.
Because I had literally been in survival mode for 9 days. Yeah.
So you wash your hair with a shampoo that you've used many, many times before.
Yeah.
And back into anaphylaxis you went.
From shampoo on my head. And I didn't... It was weird because I felt fine, and then we got home, and so it had been multiple hours, by the way. We ate dinner. It had been multiple hours, and I took a shower, and in the shower I was like washing my hair, and within 5 minutes I was like, man, I kind of have a headache. Weird. I'm like kind of getting dizzy, and I was like, whatever. So I finished the shower, continue my get ready for bed routine, and then all of a sudden it was like someone grabbed my left side of my chest and just started squeezing. The drooling came back, and I literally walked out to like tell you something's wrong, and had to like sit on the steps because my chest, it was so out of control, and we couldn't figure it out. And then I think my scalp started burning. And we were like, what the hell? So we looked up this product I had been given as a gift and I had used for a really long time. Turns out they switched the formula. And so
just a couple months ago,
the formula was fine originally. And then all of a sudden it went from like a very clean rating. We use an app called Yuka to scan everything. It had a very clean rating, and it went to poor. And because I was in this state, it just couldn't handle it. So I made it the whole day with good food, like being fine. And then I had to take Benadryl that night. And I think the most wild part about this, so I've had flare-ups before and they've gotten pretty intense, but there was a very new component to this that made me feel absolutely psychotic. Was I was having anxiety, like extreme.
It would come very pointedly.
And I haven't had anxiety since I was like 18. Like I did the whole thing. I figured out life. I got on medication. Like I feel like everyone when they're 18, like you go through this thing where like, oh my God, I'm an adult and I'm anxious. So like I know what extreme anxiety is, but I have not had that in many, many years. And it was literally like a light switch, and it felt like impending doom met anxiety, and I could feel it coming in my body. And I started to say to you, it's happening, it's coming. And you're like, what are you talking about? And I would just start crying and feel like I was never going to get better. And then I talked to Kate again, and I was like, what is this? Like, what is going on?
Yeah. Can I opt out?
Anxiety is a sign of anaphylaxis, which is wild. I did not realize that.
And also like super poorly timed. I mean, when your body is already freaking out and then your mind is like, yeah, we're fucked.
What if we're dying? Yeah.
It's like the worst combo.
It really was. And so she actually was able to tell me, if you take this and this, which were 2 supplements and medications we take to kind of get our flare-ups under control, she's like, it will take down the anxiety. And I'm like, okay. Like, and she knew what I was talking about specifically enough. She said, take it when it starts to come. Because it was like a ramp up. So I would like feel it a little and be like, oh, you're fine. Like, I'm anxious, but I'm fine. And she's like, as soon as you feel it start to come, take the protocol and it will take it out. And it worked. Like, ever since that point, I felt it coming and I didn't catch it the first time. So I was like crying, sobbing, impending doom, horrible anxiety. Everything was bad. And then literally as soon as it kicked in, I was like,
I'm good. I want to play Animal Crossing.
I'm going to play Animal Crossing. And that's that's
which I'm grateful for. But it was like,
made me feel psychotic. I was like, how can I literally be like impending doom and then 40 minutes later be completely fine? And then once I figured out how to manage that, I was able to get out of the anxiety spiral. But it was just really tough. And I mean, we talked about this last night. It's really hard because this is so new. And there are a lot of times where you don't have control in your life. Like if you've ever been to therapy, they'll be like, circle of control, focus on what you can control. And what my therapist said when we were talking about this, she goes, the difference is in this situation, there literally is no control. Like, and how scary that it's your own body betraying you, that you can't stop it. Like you can't, I can certainly do things to try to prevent it. And sometimes that's like what I said to you. I go, I didn't even eat anything bad. Like I didn't even do this to myself. Cause if you eat things and make a choice and then have a reaction, it's kind of like, okay, well,
you walked into,
you kind of walked into
natural
this,
consequences,
but literally oil clogged in my eye, and that was so out of control. And everything that followed, like I couldn't work for 9 days, right? Like I had to take time off of Life with Beth and Court and social media management. And I literally would just sit there and be like, at what point is this going to cross over? And like, my heart's going to stop. Like, what are we doing? And so we had a conversation about that last night, about how this really is out of control sometimes and how we're learning to prevent it the best we can. But then also I had to like really do some mindset work, because there are some people who literally get so in their head and feel so scared that they don't leave the house anymore, or they don't go out to eat, or they don't go do things. Like it's not like the consequences. Like I'll use the analogy of burning your hand on the stove, because I've done that with popcorn more times than I care to admit.
That's accurate.
But you burn and you're like, ow, and you pull away real quick and it kind of stings for a little bit. You might have a blister for a day. Like it's still something that happens to you, but like, you know what to expect. You know, like, oh shit, okay, now blister, put cold water on it. It'll be gone.
And also don't touch hot popcorn.
Don't touch hot popcorn. Right. It was the pan. Yeah. It wasn't the popcorn. But you know what to expect. Or if you have a cold or whatever, like if you've had the flu, you kind of generally know like what the steps are and how to get through it. But with this, it's so violent and severe that you're sitting with an EpiPen on your lap and you're like, is this it? Like, is this the time it's going to cross over? Do we need to go to urgent care? Do we need to go to ER? And some of you might be like, why didn't you go to urgent care or ER? There's nothing. They would have kept me there and monitored me. And unless they are specialized in mast cell activation syndrome, which the odds of an ER doctor knowing that, it wouldn't have done anything. The best thing I could have done is had the EpiPen, because that's what would have happened anyway. If it got to the point where my throat was swelling shut, like it was the first reaction I had, then we would have gone. But literally all I could do was take Benadryl. I knew Benadryl was calming it to an extent, and sit with the EpiPen, right?
We've been in ERs and urgent cares enough to know, like I could tell you exactly how it's going to play out. Yeah. And they're there to make sure that you don't die. Yeah. Other than that, they're like, so
they're going to stab me with an EpiPen anyway. Yeah.
You know, and they'll be like, follow up with your doctor. Like there's only so much we can do. So then it's like you end up in this position where you need an ER for like people who have a very specific condition, which obviously I know doesn't exist. But that's the scary part about this, is like you want a doctor to like say like, am I safe? Am I okay right now?
But they don't know.
But unless they know your condition, they can't really know.
Yeah. And so all of that to say, back to like the psychological aspect of it, the first day we went out to go get food, I literally it wasn't the impending doom anxiety, but I was like feeling fearful and anxious. And I'm like, what if we go out to eat and the medicine doesn't work? What if we're in the store and someone's I started to go down that road. And I literally, to like get my brain to calm down, had to journal 12 pages and say like, this feels really scary. But at the end of the day, like I can't live in fear, right? Like all I can do is try to prevent it. I can have medication, but like I cannot continue to be in this state of mind. And it actually helped a lot. I slept well for like the first time in 2 weeks. But this is a piece that we're learning to navigate, is like, how do you not let this control your life, but how do you navigate it when it does show up? And each time I feel like it's a different experience, and I feel like we learn like a little bit more as well.
Yeah. Well, and even just in our lifestyle, there's not a lot you can do sometimes. Like we both have been triggered at different times when someone had a campfire. We live in RV campgrounds, and the smell of the smoke will come in. Well, it'll come in through the windows. We'll shut the windows, but even to have the fan on, it pumps the smoke in and it sends us into a flare up. Or, you ate something that you've always been fine eating before, and not today. It turns into, oh, I didn't know that I was near my histamine threshold, and now you're, flushing. My face flushes down the right side, or the sun. Sometimes you're like, oh no, I didn't realize I was getting too much sun. Full flare up. So there's all of these different components. We walked into the gym locker room the other day, and someone had sprayed really heavy hairspray.
I think it was the Suave hairspray my mom used to wear in the 80s. But yeah, so that was my first time going back to the gym since all of this happened. And I walk in, and that's the first thing I smell. And I'm like, all I need to do is change my shoes. It'll be fine. Sit down, change my shoes. All of a sudden, instant headache. My nose gets stuffy, and I'm just like, gotta go. I grab my gym shoes and go out in my socks. So yeah, it's really tricky.
It's really unpredictable, and it can really mess with your mindset, especially if you're stuck in a flare up, which you have been, and we're fingers crossed.
I'm out. So to conclude the story, I have finished the steroids, finished the antibiotics. My eye is mostly back to normal. I put on makeup for the first time today, which, speaking of anxiety, I was like, I swear to God, if this like moves it all back in. Oh, by the way, what we think caused all of this. Yeah. So closing, I'm okay now, but yes and no. Like the immediate part has passed, but I'm still tired. I'm still kind of reacting to a little bit of food. Like it's not a quick over. Like once you are over something like a cold and you're like, oh, I feel better. It's not quick. It like takes a while to correct itself. However, we finally put the pieces together, and we're 99% sure what caused this was after the therapy of crying and all of that night, I had just bought a sleep mask to help with my sleep, to make everything better.
That's important for MCAS.
Sleep is important. So I was like trying to proactively make my body be better. And I think the eye mask must have trapped something in, clogged it, because it was that next morning I woke up and we had the situation. So that shit went back to Amazon. I was like, I am not playing around with this again. I will just deal with my sleep habits. But yeah, so that's that.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is mast cell madness. But it's just a fraction of the story. This was just this week's episode.
Unfortunately, I think there will be more stories. But yeah, I'm not going to have them ask questions because Google would know better than we do at this point, but we'll throw some resources in the bottom. And that way, if you're interested, you can dig in a little bit more. And I'm sure Kate, our friend, will be around on our page. She is very good at, talking about it, answering questions, things like that. So
for sure.
I'm alive. Everything's okay.
Everything is okay. And if you don't already follow us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and podcast platforms, all at Life with Beth and Court. Our website is lifewithbethandcourt.com that has RVing resources and soon to be some MCAS resources, because this is obviously a big part of our lives and it's not going away anytime soon. And this affects how we live the RV lifestyle. So we're going to start adding some of the resources that we'll have linked below. We're also going to create a blog post over on our website so that you can bookmark that. Why are you laughing?
We tried to pretend like this wasn't a big deal for however long it's been since June, but we finally were like, you know what? This is part of our life. This is a big part of our life. And just as RV life is, I just said life like 6 times, just as RV living is, this is too. And so we finally just agreed, like, why not share what we're learning in case it helps someone else? Or if there's someone who does want to travel and they have an autoimmune condition, they can kind of look at it all together and say, what does this look like?
And see if they think we're crazy or if they can survive.
I mean, after last week, I'm kind of like, I'm ready to go back home.
Yeah. Before we used to just kind of hide it and put on brave faces. And now we're just like, we can't because sometimes it gets pretty bad. And like Court said, there's no point in hiding it when we could share it. So
I think one of the things we realized is there's shame around the condition, which literally makes no sense. Like, there's nothing we did wrong, but we feel like we're perceived as less than, maybe, or like that we can't do things that other people can do, or it just feels really embarrassing to tell people, if I have a tomato on my salad, we're all going to be at the ER for the night. Yeah. So we're still kind of like trying to figure out where the shame about it comes from and unpack it. I think it's probably just because like this version of ourselves with this condition is not what we've been used to for most of our lives. It's
not what we envisioned either. I mean, we like to be out hiking on trails and, you know, going on adventures. We don't like to be sitting at home in completely closed in with an EpiPen in our hands, hoping that our hearts don't stop. So, and I think there's a piece of the shame comes from like, it feels dumb to always have to say like, I'm sick again. I'm sick again. I'm sick again.
Yeah, you feel like people are going to judge you, which is so odd because we do this all the time where if it's someone else, we like totally understand and we're like, oh my gosh, how can we accommodate? But then when it's us, it like feels embarrassing and inconvenient. And we also don't want it to be our identities, which is like kind of, you know, hypocritical a little bit because it is a part of our identity, but we don't want that to always be like everything we talk about. But at the same time, like it does impact so many areas of life. You kind of have to be like, no, I can't have that dip, or no, I can't have that drink.
Or it's just like, it's embarrassing when people are like, come over for dinner. And we're like, yeah, probably shouldn't. And they're like, well, what are you allergic to? Like, I'll just make something you can have. And we're like, it's literally such a big list.
Let me just tell you, if we ever come to your home, chicken tacos
with zero seasoning.
Seasoning. We can build our own things on. The thing I love about my therapist is she always like keeps me in check. And I'll say, I feel like so embarrassed and it's an inconvenience. And she just reminds me like, it shouldn't be. Like,
so sorry that my life-threatening illness is an inconvenience to you.
Like, and she's younger than me, so I love her perspective because she didn't get like the millennial shame that we did. So I'm like, oh yeah, why should I feel inconvenient or small or embarrassed or whatever? But that's just like part of learning this is like, if my condition makes you uncomfortable, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to help you through that. Like, I'm trying to just stay alive and like figure it out myself. And so I think, we've like had that conversation that there's shame there for whatever reason, and grieving the life we had before it got really bad. And, you know, we'll talk about that later, but it wasn't always this bad. There are some conditions that played into that, but we just still have a lot of work to do about grieving life that was, accepting what it is now, while not being fear-based, while not feeling shameful. Like, there's just a lot
happening.
There's a lot of pieces.
Yeah. So, I mean, that wasn't as entertaining of a tale, but hopefully it was...
saved me at least 50 DMs I had to respond to.
Hopefully it was worth tuning in for. And we'll see you again next week for another episode of Tales from the Rig.
Bye.